would you do if you found a love letter written to someone else? Would you open it up and read it? Before you decide, let me give you a couple of things to think about. The letter might contain very intimate information. It could be heartwarming or heartbreaking. If the letter had been written by someone you knew, grandmother, grandfather perhaps, it could provide a way to get to know them in a new and wonderful way. Or it could change everything you thought you knew about your family. And once you read the letter, you're going to have to make a decision. What do you do with the information you learned? Do you ignore it? Can you ignore it? Or do you act on it? So I'll ask again, would you read it? In a couple of minutes, I'll tell you about love letters I found and the unexpected journey that came from my decision to read them. But first, I have a confession. I have an impractical love of old handwriting. Words that scratch and dance across the page are just eye candy to me. And years ago, I decided I wanted to design a font, a typeface, that mimicked the look of old-timey handwriting. Others had done this before, so I wasn't going to be the first. But still, to me, this sounded like a really fun project. I work full-time as a graphic designer, but this wasn't a project for work. This was just going to be something I worked on in my free time. Some people call projects like this passion projects, where you do something or make something purely for the joy of doing or making. And one reason I'm a real fan of this kind of project is that anybody working on the project, regardless of skill level, is equally entitled to feel joy. Now, what I needed for my project was a specimen I could use as the basis for my font. And for years, I kept an eye out for just the right sample. And I found what I was looking for at an antique store about 10 miles away from here. I loved the swash greeting and the loops and lines of this beautiful handwriting. I could see the letters had been mailed from Berlin to France during the middle of World War II. I could see they had all been signed by a man named Marcel. And I couldn't help but to wonder if they might be love letters. So you're probably wondering if I read them right away. And the answer is no. But that's only because the letters were written in French. And I don't know French. But for the purpose of the font, it didn't matter, because an A in French looks like an A in English. I bought 5 letters, brought them home, scanned them at super high resolution, then I put the originals away for safekeeping. Using the scans, I identified favorite individual letters, traced them, then slowly coaxed those outlines into a fully functioning typeface. Thousands of tiny revisions were required to make the font both beautiful and functional. When I started the project, I was thinking it was going to be a quick and easy little side project, but because I only worked on it evenings and weekends, and the software was much more complicated than I had anticipated, it actually took 12 years to complete. When I started the project, I didn't know any other type designers. I didn't have anyone I could turn to for help or guidance. So it required a lot of trial and error. But that's another beautiful thing about passion projects. You can try and fail without consequence. If something doesn't work, you can try something else. Passion projects allow you to embrace a mindset of creative curiosity, which in turn leaves room for serendipity, which are those magical connections that can't be planned or manufactured. I also kept on working on the font because I was able to learn and grow. It was gratifying to be creating something, and it was a whole lot of fun to press a key on my keyboard and see a letter I designed appear on my screen. 9 years after starting the project, I took the original letters out from where they had been held for safekeeping, and I realized I had forgotten what they look like. But keep in mind, while I worked on the font, I was working on one letter at a time in black and white. So I had forgotten that the paper itself was a buttery yellow, that the edge of the page was ruffled like a feather, that stripes of blue and red were painted in the background. And I realized I knew Marcel's handwriting intimately. I knew every nick and curve of every letter, but I didn't know anything about him. So I hired someone to translate the letters from French to English. The first letter was written to his 3 young daughters. They were approximately 9, 7, and 4. He offered words of fatherly advice, such as don't pick the blossoms from the cherry tree, but wait until the fruit is ripe. He inquired whether they got bread and milk while their mom went to Paris, and if his youngest was still sucking her thumb. And he signed the letter, "From your papa who sends his love from 1,300 kilometers away, your papa who thinks about you all the time." So it was a love letter, though not the kind of love letter I had anticipated. The second letter was written to his wife. The handwriting was smaller and not as neat. "I am in the barrack with Mamille and Bernard," he wrote. Mamille is in the corner by the fire like an old grandfather, and he sings to us the Song of the Mason by Maurice Chevalier. Marcel told his wife there was a guy in camp who had tricks to get food. I learned Marcel was one of 650,000 ordinary French civilians who had been forced to go to Germany and work in factories, farms, and mines to support the German war effort. In Marcel's case, he ended up in a labor camp in Berlin associated with a Daimler factory that made Panther tanks. Some of those tanks were sent to France to fight against those trying to liberate Marcel's homeland. In letters 3, 4, and 5, he talked about cold, constant hunger, and clothes he had been given to wear. In one letter, he described in detail hiding in a bunker during an air raid. It turned out we, the US, we were bombing that factory, because what would we want to bomb more than a factory making Panther tanks? Despite these circumstances, these letters were filled with hope and love, not hate. It was remarkable. He offered his wife words of encouragement and ended every letter with an endearment such as, "And for you, my beloved, I always save my most tender kisses." As guilty as I felt about being a voyeur and reading these very private words, I came to understand the importance of this testimony. Thousands of French workers never returned, and civilian forced laborers have largely become a footnote in World War II history. But the more that I felt like I got to know Marcel by reading these letters, the more I wanted to ensure he wasn't lost to time. I began a quest to learn more about him. It took about a year. Answers were often elusive, but with the help of a genealogy researcher and more than a bit of serendipity, I learned 2 of his daughters were still alive. I traveled to Paris to meet Marcel's family and to learn more about this man whose handwriting I had been looking at for 9 years. I had the honor of meeting his daughter Denise, who was 78 years old, and had no recollection of ever seeing or reading her father's letters before. I brought my laptop to show them the font, which was still in progress. I typed each of their names in the font based on Marcel's handwriting, and I received their blessing to name the font Marcel Script in his honor. In total, I met 4 generations of Marcel's family. Some of his grandchildren who were in their 50s, they knew he had been in Germany during the war, but they didn't know where and they didn't know why. They didn't know he was in Berlin or worked for Daimler. Almost everything they know about his wartime experience, they learned by reading these love letters. And between the letters and the font, they told me it was as if I had brought him back to life. Some people have expressed surprise that I would design a font, have the letters translated, spend so much time trying to learn about Marcel, then write a book about this journey of discovery. I joke it happened because Minnesota winters are long. But the truth is, this only happened because this was a passion project. Joy was the reason I started. I continued because I was able to learn and grow. It was gratifying because I was creating something. I was able to embrace a mindset of creative curiosity, which in turn left room for serendipity. If you have a passion project, and I hope you do, I encourage you to spend more time doing or making whatever it is that brings you joy. You never know what unexpected journey awaits. Thank you.